The dust settled around her boots as she stood before the weathered door of the Double Creek Ranch, her knuckles hovering inches from the wood. Sarah Mitchell had ridden for 3 days straight, her father's old mare beneath her now tied to the post, head hung low from exhaustion. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Arizona territory, and she could feel the weight of her empty canteen against her hip, a reminder of just how desperate things had become. She knocked. 3 solid raps that echoed her heartbeat. Inside, Tom Brennan was hunched over his ledger, trying to make sense of numbers that refused to add up no matter how many times he reworked them. At 42, he'd spent half his life building this ranch from nothing, and the other half watching it slowly crumble. The drought had been unforgiving, the cattle prices had dropped, and his last ranch hand had left 2 weeks ago for better prospects in California. When the knock came, he almost didn't answer. He was tired of bad news, tired of creditors, tired of the whole damn struggle. But he opened the door anyway, because that's what you did out here. You opened the door. The woman standing before him was young, maybe 25, with sun-darkened skin and eyes that held both fire and fear. Her clothes were men's work clothes, patched and repatched, and her hat was pulled low. But it was her hands that caught his attention, calloused and strong, the hands of someone who knew hard work intimately. "I'm looking for work," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor he could see in her jaw. "I can ride, rope, mend fence, break horses. I can work sunrise to sunset, and I don't complain. I just need a place to stay and enough to eat." Tom studied her for a long moment. The proper thing would be to send her away. A woman working a ranch alongside men wasn't unheard of, but it was complicated. People talked. But as he looked past her at the mare that was clearly on its last legs, at the determined set of her shoulders that couldn't quite hide her exhaustion, he thought about his own ledger and the work piling up around him. "You eaten today?" he asked. "Yesterday," she admitted. He stepped back from the door. "Come in. We'll talk after you've had something." Sarah followed him into the simple ranch house, her pride warring with her hunger. She'd been raised to never take charity, but she'd also been raised to survive, and right now survival meant swallowing that pride. Tom moved around the kitchen with the practiced efficiency of a man long used to caring for himself, and within minutes he'd set before her a plate of beans, cornbread, and salt pork. She ate slowly, deliberately, though every fiber of her being wanted to devour it all at once. "Where you coming from?" Tom asked, settling into the chair across from her with a cup of coffee. "Oklahoma. Had a homestead with my father. He died 6 weeks back. Couldn't work the land alone and couldn't pay what we owed. Lost everything." The words came out flat, emotionless, because if she let any feeling into them, she might break entirely. Tom nodded. He knew that story, knew it too well. The frontier was full of such stories, each one a small tragedy that the land swallowed up and forgot. "I'll be straight with you," he said. "This ranch is barely holding on. I can't pay much. Room and board and $20 a month. The work's hard, and there's a lot of it. And I won't lie, having a woman working here is going to cause talk in town." "I don't care about talk," Sarah said, meeting his eyes directly. "I care about not starving. I care about having a roof. And I care about earning my keep honestly." Something in her directness appealed to Tom. He'd spent too many years dealing with men who made promises they couldn't keep, who looked for easy ways out. This woman had ridden 3 days on a dying horse to knock on a stranger's door. That took a kind of courage he respected. "All right then," he said, extending his hand. "We'll try it for a month. See how it works." Her grip was firm and sure. "You won't regret it." The first week nearly broke her. Tom hadn't exaggerated about the work. She was up before dawn, mucking stalls, hauling water, riding fence lines in the brutal heat. Her body, already worn down from the journey and the months of struggling alone, screamed in protest. But she'd made a promise, and Sarah Mitchell kept her promises. Every evening she collapsed into the small room Tom had given her in the barn loft, too tired even to eat sometimes, and every morning she rose again. Tom watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, never shirked the hardest jobs. She worked like someone proving something, not just to him, but to herself. By the end of that first week, he found himself unconsciously lightening her load, trying to spare her the worst of it, until one evening she confronted him. "I said I could do the work," she told him, standing in the barn with her hands on her hips. dust and sweat covering her from head to toe. If you don't think I can, tell me now. But don't coddle me. I don't need coddling. I need to prove I can make it out here. He saw then what drove her. It wasn't just about survival. It was about dignity. About proving to herself that losing her father and her home hadn't broken something essential inside her. Fair enough, he said. Tomorrow we start breaking those Mustangs I bought last month. That suit you? A smile flickered across her face, the first real smile he'd seen. That suits me just fine. The Mustangs were wild as the wind, and breaking them was dangerous work. But Sarah had learned from her father, who'd been one of the best horsemen in Oklahoma, and she had a gift for it. She seemed to understand something about these wild creatures, about their fear and their pride. Tom watched her work with a paint mare that had thrown every man who'd tried to ride her, watched Sarah approach with soft words and patient hands, and something shifted in his chest. They fell into a rhythm, the two of them, working side by side from dawn until dusk, sharing simple meals, talking about the ranch and the work, but also, gradually, about other things. She told him about her father, about the books he'd read to her by lamplight, about the dreams they'd had for their homestead. He told her about his late wife, dead these 10 years from fever, about the son he'd lost in a riding accident, about the loneliness that had settled into his bones so deep he'd almost forgotten it was there. The town did talk, as Tom had predicted. When they rode in together for supplies, eyes followed them and tongues wagged. Sarah heard the word improper, and worse more than once. But she held her head high, and Tom found himself not caring what they said. For the first time in years, the ranch felt alive again. 2 months passed, then 3. The Mustangs were broken and sold for good money. The autumn rains came, blessing the parched land, and with Sarah's help, Tom managed to repair all the fences and outbuildings that had fallen into disrepair. The ledger started looking better. More than that, the ranch started feeling like a home again rather than just a place he was slowly losing point one evening. As they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, Sarah spoke quietly. My month's been up for a while now. Tom felt his stomach clench. He'd been dreading this moment, though he'd known it would come. That it has. I've saved almost all the money you've paid me. Got enough now to maybe start over somewhere. Buy a little piece of land, try again. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The thing is, she continued, still staring at the horizon, I've been thinking about what starting over means. I thought it meant going back to what I had, getting another homestead, working it alone, proving I could do what my father and I couldn't. But these months here, I've realized something. Starting over doesn't mean going back. It means building something new. Tom turned to look at her, his heart beating hard against his ribs. She met his eyes. This ranch needs more than a hired hand. It needs a partner, someone who'll invest in it, work it, care about it as much as you do. And I think maybe you need more than that too. I think maybe we both do. Sarah, he said, her name catching in his throat. I'm 20 years older than you. I'm a broken-down rancher with more debts than prospects. You could do better. Better. She shook her head. Tom, I've spent 3 months working beside you. I've seen you get up every day and fight for this place even when it seemed hopeless. I've seen you treat me with respect when half the territory thinks you shouldn't have hired me at all. I've seen your kindness and your strength and your stubbornness. That's not settling. That's finding something real. He reached out slowly, taking her work-roughened hand in his. I don't have much to offer. You have this ranch. You have your integrity. You have tomorrow, same as me. She squeezed his hand. And maybe that's enough to build on. The proposal, when it came a week later, was simple and practical, delivered in the barn while they were mucking stalls. But the kiss that followed was neither simple nor practical. It was full of hope and hunger and the promise of something neither had expected to find again. They married quietly, with just the local minister and 2 witnesses from town. Sarah invested her saved wages into the ranch, making her a true partner. The townspeople talked, of course, but eventually the talk died down because Sarah and Tom just kept working, kept building, kept proving that what they had was real. The ranch prospered. Not overnight, and not without continued struggle, but with 2 people sharing the burden, the impossible became merely difficult. They bought more cattle, hired a few hands when they could afford it, and slowly the Double Creek Ranch became known as one of the better operations in the territory. But the real transformation wasn't in the ledgers or the herd counts. It was in the way Tom smiled more, laughed easier. It was in the way Sarah stood a little taller, her eyes losing that haunted, desperate look. It was in the way they moved together, two people who'd been broken by loss finding wholeness in partnership, that on a spring morning 2 years after Sarah had first knocked on that weathered door, she stood on the porch watching Tom work with a young colt in the corral. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the flutter of new life. She thought about her father, about the homestead they'd lost, about the desperate woman she'd been riding up to this ranch with nothing but determination and fear. That knock on the door had been an ending, the final collapse of everything she'd known. But Tom had opened it and offered her not just work, not just survival, but possibility. Together they'd taken that possibility and built something neither could have created alone. The colt in the corral suddenly broke free, kicking up his heels in pure joy, and Tom's laughter rang across the yard. Sarah smiled, feeling the baby kick as if responding to its father's happiness. She'd come here looking for work, for a way to keep going. Instead, she'd found a home, a partner, and a future that stretched out before her full of promise. Sometimes, she thought, you knock on a door expecting one thing and step through into something entirely different. Something better. Sometimes the ending you fear is just the beginning you needed, if only you're brave enough to knock and someone's brave enough to answer. Tom caught her watching and waved, his face bright with love and contentment. She waved back. This man who'd taken a chance on a desperate stranger and found his own salvation in the process. The ranch that had been slowly dying was alive again, full of purpose and possibility. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also a place where people could remake themselves, where loss could transform into gain, where a knock on a door could change everything. Sarah had learned that the hard way. But standing here now, feeling the warmth of the sun and the life growing inside her, watching her husband gentle a wild horse with patient hands, she knew that every hard mile of her journey had been worth it as she'd knocked on this door for work. Tom had opened it for so much more. Together, they'd opened it for a new beginning.